Hey, welcome to this week's Market Snapshot. Buyers, what do you need to know for the last 7 days in the Northern Virginia real estate market? And that's going to be critical for you to get out there in the market and succeed. I'm telling you, it's getting ugly out there. Let's dive into this. We've been talking about the last couple of weeks that we feel like we're starting to get into that spring market, that spring has sprung, and we're seeing more and more evidence that you're starting to see as we go into these numbers. You'll see that contingencies are starting to reduce. The inspections on properties are still reducing. They're not to the 2022, 2023 levels yet, but they are getting more and more aggressive, and they're only getting worse and worse each week. So but what this means for you as a buyer is you need to be out there looking. If you're considering buying in the next 60 days, you need to do it now while there's still some contingencies happening. There are still some properties that are sitting for a little while, but you need to be ready. You need to have your team in order. You need to be prepared to do what you can do to protect yourself, even if you have to go into an offer without contingencies, and there are ways to do that. And you just really need to be strategic when you go into the market, and your agent needs to be very aggressive, and they need to understand how to structure an offer that gives the seller what they want, makes you appear most enticing to the seller, because it's not just about the price, it's also about the terms. You can actually make an offer look really, really good if it's a well-written offer, and if it's a clean offer, and it's done the way that the seller and the seller's agents are looking for. That can actually get you a shoe-in without being the highest offer. So make sure that you're working with a very competent agent that knows how to do this for you. If you need some help and you would like us to help you out, I'm going to put a number at the end of this for you to reach out to us for a free buyer consult. As a buyer, we're going to take you through, and we're going to go through and look at a strategic financial plan for you to help you be prepared and protected through the market. We're going to come up with a strategy that's going to help you build your team ahead of schedule so that you can go into these offers without contingencies but have full protections. So nuance that a lot of people don't know about. And we're going to help you negotiate with the lenders out there to get the better interest rate. The interest rates are fantastic right now, and that's why the buyers are starting to flood the market early. So you know how to handle that with your lenders. So it's a competitive time for buyers. But if you're planning on buying this time around, go ahead and do it now. Get out there in the market. And if you're waiting for prices to come down, thinking that the market's going to crash eventually, nobody has a crystal ball, but we are not seeing any markers that tell us that prices will be coming down soon. So all you're doing is letting the prices tick up higher and higher in the hope that they do come down. So if you're a buyer, let's talk. Let's go through a strategy session. Again, I'll give you the details at the end of the video. And let's dive into the numbers so you can see why I'm saying what I'm saying. So here we go. As always, our black line is our under contract numbers. These are the buyer activity or the demand. And then the teal line here is the inventory or the supply. So this is a supply versus demand graph. And remember, this is different. These are lead measures. These are not lag measures. We're not looking at sold data, because sold data can be anywhere from 30 to 60, 75 days old. We're looking at data for the last 7 days, so we can see real time what needs to happen. So you can see that buyer activity, number of contracts, has increased again. And you can see that it's on a steady increase up since about the middle of January. We've started that spring has sprung. We're seeing the numbers going up. And we had this dip here, but this was the 2 weeks for the snow. And then on the inventory side for the sellers, we can see it's on a trend upward as well. It's not increasing as much as buyer activity. And so what happens with that is you can see that the inventory was kind of flat this last week. Buyer activity still increased, so that increased the gap here. So if we go down here to buyer's market versus seller's market, we have the normal market is right here, this gray line. Anything above this normal market indicates a seller's market, which means that the seller is in control. Anything below the buyer's market is the buyer is in control. When you're a seller, when you're up in this area up here, that means you are in the if you are handling your property correctly, then this is where everything flows very, very smoothly. Buyers, this is also the opportunity for you to be strategic and flow right into that as well and make for a nice, easy transaction, but you've got to protect yourself as well, so make sure you do that. Okay, so we can see that we are on a steady trend upward in the the strength of the seller's market, and you can see that it's not doing what it did last year. We had a little bit of a spike in middle of February last year, and then we started trending downwards, but it looks like we're going to continue trending upwards. So I think that we're going to see this go into the spring with a strong seller's market. And so if you're interested in one of those consultations, please feel free to reach out to us at 703-783-2143. There's no charge for that. Kelly and I are happy to do it for you. If you end up working with us, that's fantastic. But even if you don't, at least you'll have good strategic information that you can use to navigate this market. All right, everybody have a... Okay, and speaking of navigating this market, so now we have the contract trends. As you can see, this was for February 10th through February 16th, a total of 165 contracts. You can see when we go to contract price that we had 71% of properties sold at or above market value, asking price, with 37% of that being above the actual sales price. 29% of the properties were lower than asking price. So if we go down here, and these are all Virginia, if we go down here, you'll see that 56% of properties sold within the first 7 days. 56%. Now again, just like last week, 56% sold in 7 days, but only 37% went above asking price. So not all properties are getting multiple offers. Not all properties are a bidding war. There are, about a little over half of those that sold quickly that are in that state. But if your agent is in communication with the selling agent, you may not have to go above asking price. So it's still an opportunity there, but the properties are going quickly. So you have to have your team in place and be able to move quickly. Sellers, you need to be aware that just because you get an offer the first week, in a seller's mind, a lot of times they think to themselves, okay, if I got an offer within 2 days on this, what's coming? And usually your first offer is your best offer. So sellers, make sure you're working with your agent on that aspect of it for realistic expectations. You can see about 15% of properties went between 8 and 21 days, and then anything over 22 days seems to have gone under asking price. So that 22-day mark is now it's starting to trickle in to where that window of importance for the seller is getting shorter and shorter before buyers will start trying to reduce the price because properties are moving so quickly. A few weeks ago, we were seeing that you would have a large percentage of properties that were sitting for more than 22 days, but they weren't all going for under asking price. So just keep that in mind as you're going through this, buyers and sellers. Financing versus cash, kind of irrelevant, but 84% were financed. Contingencies, so we had been seeing consistently that finance contingencies were 70 to 75, even as high as 80%. It's down to 67% on contracts. Appraisal contingencies have come down hugely, 59%, and this is important because when properties go over asking price, the question of is it going to appraise comes in. So one of the ways you strengthen your offer is having that appraisal contingency in there. One of the ways you strengthen your offer is as a buyer not having that appraisal contingency. So you can see that more and more buyers are starting to waive that appraisal contingency, which can be risky. So you have to make sure that you're secure enough to do that. Home inspections, this is the huge one. It's down to 58% of the contracts had them. A few weeks ago, we saw as high as 80% had them. So slowly but surely, we're starting to see those home inspections coming off of the contracts. So just be prepared for that, buyers and sellers. Be realistic on your side, because still there's 42% that are getting the inspection contingency. With regards to the contract length of time, about 48% are within 16 to 30 days. And again, for a buyer's perspective, you can actually strengthen your offer by closing more quickly, so your lender does matter in that regard. And then there were 7% there were 10 to 15 days, and 2% were actually, where's that 2%? 60 days plus. Okay. Sellers, 100% of these contracts had buyer agent compensation. Now, this does not mean that the entire buyer agent compensation was covered. So buyers, you need to be aware that you may have to cover a little bit of your own buyer agent commission. But sellers in 100% of these contracts did contribute at least a portion to the buyer agent compensation. And about 81% of that was over 2.5%. 13% was over 3%. So the sellers are paying buyers agents agents, and they're paying them well because they're receiving strong offers. So sellers, you need to be aware of that if you want to compete with the other properties on the market, you're likely going to need to be willing to pay some kind of buyer agent commission on the process. Okay, if you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to us. The number is 703-783-2143, and we will see you guys on next week's Market Snapshot.